But it's also true that much of history is indisputably factual because we have artifacts and coins and birth records and archaeology, and somebody in Mesopotamia kept a record of how much grain they ate. It's not all up in the air to change or delete or make up based on what makes you feel better today. Portland Public Schools has a plan now to teach kids that the idea of gender being mainly binary was brought here by white colonizers. The curriculum guide says, when the United States was colonized by white settlers, their views around gender were forced upon the people already living here. Not even Star Trek would try that stuff.
A new controversy has erupted over how history is being taught. In Portland, public schools have introduced a curriculum claiming that the concept of gender as binary male and female was imposed by white colonizers. Critics call the move absurd, warning that rewriting history to fit modern feelings risks erasing the very foundations of society. They argue this is not education, but manipulation. Analysts note that while conservatives have been accused of whitewashing history, liberals too have weaponized it, pushing an approach known as presentism, which judges the past by today's moral standards.
Show or a movie, but history books, that's not supposed to be fan fiction. How we teach our kids history has become a big controversy these days, with liberals accusing conservatives of wanting to whitewash the past, and sometimes that's true, sometimes they do. But plenty of liberals also want to abuse history to control the present. And last month, a scholar named James Sweet caught hell for calling them out for doing just that. He criticized a phenomenon known as presentism, which means judging everyone in the past by the standards of the present. It's the belief that people who lived 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago really should have known better.
Critics highlight the absurdity of presentism with a simple comparison. Judging the past by today's standards is like canceling your 10-year-old self for childhood mistakes. They argue that just as no one should be condemned for believing sea monkeys were real pets or for awkward school dance outfits, historical figures should not be erased for failing to meet 2025's moral codes.
Which is so stupid. It's like getting mad at yourself for not knowing what you know now when you were 10. Stupid me, spending all that time raising sea monkeys and playing with slot cards and jerking off to a Playboy in the barn. Who doesn't have moments from your past that make you cringe? Who hasn't said, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I wore that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I did that. You ate dirt. You wanted to be a Ghostbuster. You shoplifted gum. You tried to be a white breakdancer.
The debate over history has intensified as activists push to judge past figures by today's moral codes. Critics warn that even icons like George Washington and Columbus are being rebranded as villains simply for living before modern standards. Opponents argue the movement is built on hypocrisy. While branding themselves as guardians of virtue, activists act as though they have lived flawless lives, never saying or thinking the wrong thing. Historians point out that practices like slavery were not unique to America. From Egypt to Greece, Rome, Arabia, and Africa itself, slavery was widespread. To claim America invented it in 1619, they argue, is as false as saying pizza was invented the year Domino's arrived.
Yes, because we hadn't then grown into the persons we would become. And humanity writ large is just the collective version of that. Did Columbus commit atrocities? Of course. But people back then were generally atrocious. Everybody who could afford one had a slave, including people of color. The way people talk about slavery these days, you'd think it was a uniquely American thing that we invented in 1619. But slavery throughout history has been the rule, not the exception. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, Romans, the Arabs, British, the early Americans, all the way up through R. Kelly.
Debates over America's past have reignited as activists repeat familiar claims that the nation was built on slavery and is beyond redemption. Social media amplifies the message daily. Critics, however, point to what they call blatant hypocrisy. The same voices condemning America's centuries-old sins are now offering sympathy to extremist groups like Hamas organizations that in 2025 openly advocate violence and terror. Analysts warn that cruelty is not unique to America or to any race. It is a human reality. History shows that power, in any hands, is often abused. To deny this truth for the sake of ideology, they argue, is not only dishonest but dangerous.
Who do you think gathered the slaves from the interior of Africa to sell to slave traders? Africans, who also kept their own slaves. We're a species prone to making others of our species our bitch. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Humans are not good people. And the capacity for cruelty is a human thing, not a white thing. That's the truth, even though it doesn't jibe with the current narrative.
Critics argue that presentism rests on arrogance, a time machine, where modern observers always win. From the comfort of air-conditioned apartments, complete with Wi-Fi and AI, people judge those who lived centuries ago without science, medicine, or basic plumbing. The reality, analysts note, is that anyone living then would have faced the same conditions and shared the same worldview. By the same logic, if George Washington lived today, he would adapt to modern society, tweeting, perhaps, while sipping a Starbucks latte.
But in today's world, when truth conflicts with narrative, it's the truth that has to apologize. Being woke is like a magic moral time machine where you judge everybody against what you imagine you would have done in 1066, and you always win. Presentism. Yeah, this professor is right. It's just a way to congratulate yourself about being better than George Washington because you have a gay friend and he didn't. But if he was alive today, he would too. And if you weren't alive, if you were alive then, you wouldn't.
Observers warn that the debate is no longer just about history. Woke culture, they argue, is now shaping the future by targeting children in classrooms. Students are being told gender is fluid, a feeling that can change at any time. In some cases, reports claim children are even encouraged to transition without parental consent. Critics say this is not education but reckless social experimentation with consequences that could impact not only children, but the society forced to confront the fallout.
Portland Public Schools has a plan now to teach kids that the idea of gender, being mainly binary, was brought here by white colonizers. The curriculum guide says, when the United States was colonized by white settlers, their views around gender were forced upon the people already living here. Not even Star Trek would try that story. Where they discover a planet and give them separate bathrooms. It's like they finally discovered a unified theory of wokeness, incorporating all their ideas about race, gay, gender, and colonizers, like the New World was a great big diverse dance club and the Pilgrims were the bridge and tunnel crowd who came in and ruined everything.
The controversy has spread beyond the United States. In London, the play I, Joan depicts Joan of Arc as non-binary, using they divided by them pronouns. Historians note that Joan's life was not about gender politics but about faith, courage, and leading armies into battle at just 17. Her legacy, they argue, is diminished when reduced to identity debates. Critics warn the woke reinterpretation risks turning a historic warrior into little more than a pop culture symbol, rather than honoring the real teenage girl who defied an invading army.
There's a play called I, Joan, currently being presented in London, written by Charlie Josephine, who identifies as non-binary and uses they-them pronouns. And it portrays Joan of Arc as, surprise, non-binary with they-them pronouns. Which, if you think about it, makes even less sense because Joan, being French, spoke a language where every noun is masculine or feminine. Joan says in the play, I'm not a girl, I don't fit that word, as if she's a character on Euphoria. Now, it's true, Joan of Arc did wear pants, but that's what the soldiers wore, and she was soldiering. But in the retelling, Joan would rather die than stop wearing men's clothing.
Analysts warn that woke culture reduces history to performance, turning warriors into hashtags and stripping away its complexity. They argue that history is not a fantasy novel to be rewritten at will. but the record of real people who struggled, erred, and sacrificed to build today's foundations. Perfection was never the standard. Survival and innovation were. Critics add that judging the past by modern comforts is arrogance. If historical figures had today's knowledge, they would have acted differently. And if we lived in their world, we would be just as flawed. Instead of erasing history, they insist society should learn from it, because once the complexity of history is admitted, the ideological narrative collapses. Facts, they conclude, will outlast ideological crusades.
But it's also true that much of history is indisputably factual, because we have artifacts and coins and birth records and archaeology, and somebody in Mesopotamia kept a record of how much grain they ate. It's not all up in the air to change or delete or make up based on what makes you feel better today.
The debate closes with a reminder, history is not the property of activists to rewrite. It belongs to everyone, and its value lies in facing it honestly, not as propaganda, but as reality. Observers stress that while woke culture may shout and attempt erasure, the truth does not vanish. History will outlast hashtags. Defending it, they argue, is essential not because it is perfect, but because it is real.